Let's get some analysis and bring in Austin Rasmussen. He is the chairman for Republicans abroad in Norway. He joins me now from Oslo. Austin, thanks so much for your time here at TRT World. I've been speaking to Democrats abroad just a couple of hours ago, and they say they are cautiously optimistic still. What's the mood like among the Republicans?
Well, I think it's probably the same as far as being cautiously optimistic. The polls have been closing over the last week. The gap in the polls has been closing over the last week, as they typically do when they near the election. Biden still does have an advantage in the national polling, but so did Hillary Clinton. And I don't think Republicans and conservatives, generally speaking, are putting a whole lot of stock and faith in the polls anyway. One thing that seems to be clear is that there is a definitive enthusiasm gap in the United States. Trump is turning out a lot more voters that are a lot more enthusiastic, whether it be at his rallies or impromptu rallies around the country. And you just don't see that happening on the other side. Most of the enthusiasm, I think, from the Democrats is coming mostly out of a disdain for Trump rather than a support for Joe Biden.
Right, as you said, we have seen Donald Trump campaigning hard over the weekend and in the last couple of days hitting mostly all swing states. Can these last-minute voters make an impact?
Absolutely. So the narrative that was given to Democrat voters early on, when the mail-in voting was being discussed, is that Democrats need to vote in mail because it's too dangerous to go on election day. It's too dangerous to go in person to vote. And so they were telling the Democrats that they need to vote as soon as possible using their mail-in ballot. Now, of course, there are other reasons for that strategy, but as that progressed, I think Democrats started to realize that maybe this wasn't such a good idea, because now when election day comes, Democrats have that fear instilled in them. They say, well, I'm not going to go to vote in person because I've been told for so long that that's too dangerous to do. Whereas Republicans aren't living in that same level of fear. They're excited to get out. They're excited to go and vote. One aspect of this that we may see in a Trump victory is that the polls are inaccurate, and one reason for that is there are a lot of Americans who are not very outspoken about their support for Trump. They have more of a reason now than they did in 2016, for example, not to openly discuss voting for Donald Trump because of the consequences they may face in their social and professional lives for giving such support, and rather just being a little bit more reserved, showing up on election day and making sure their voice is heard in the ballot box.
Right. And Austin, let's not forget, I mean, this election is happening in the middle of pandemic, coronavirus pandemic, of course. I've seen those Trump's rallies packed. As you said, a lot of people very enthusiastic, but can this backfire? Can people see this as in some way irresponsible?
I think if there was a consistent standard being maintained throughout the pandemic, then maybe things would look a little bit different. The problem is we've had the advisories and the restrictions off and on in various states at different degrees throughout the pandemic, and a lot of Republicans looked at that and they saw situations, for example, where you had massive Black Lives Matter and Antifa riots and protests and looting and various social justice marches happening throughout the country that were garnering thousands of people at any given event. And the media weren't really treating that with the same standard that they were treating any kind of Republican or conservative or Trump rally, for example. So that message has not been consistent throughout the pandemics, and I think a lot of Republicans say, okay, if it's okay for thousands and thousands of people to stand in close quarters to riot and loot, and no one's going to say that they shouldn't be doing this for the sake of the pandemic, then there's a bit of skepticism on our side saying, okay, maybe we don't need to be living in such fear. I mean, Republicans and conservatives they're being punished for wanting to go worship at church. They're being punished for wanting to go to their children's athletic games. They're being derided because they have their own focuses in life as well, and somehow the Republican events are a lot more derided, infinitely more derided than those on the left wing. And so I don't think Republicans are concerned about the consequences that will come from a public image from those who already don't like them anyways.
Austin Rasmussen, thanks so much for your insight. He is the chairman of Republicans Abroad in Norway. Thanks, Austin.